Good afternoon, digital innovators, friends, family, and EveBat Studios fans. Onyx here. I hope you're all having a wonderful day today, and I hope what I'm about to say about the title of this video not being a fake out makes it even better.
That's right, everyone. We have a very small handful of actual solutions available to us right now for AI generation of 3D models. This is still obviously at a really rudimentary stage. There are no tools presently available that I have seen that are producing perfect textures or perfect geometry yet. There are certainly none that are capable of complete game-ready PBR hard surface output yet. But we're going to show you techniques that you, as an artist, can utilize to incorporate this text to 3D AI generation into your own workflow. As far as we understand, these techniques are valid as of August 28th, 2023. But since we're on the actual cutting edge of this whole technology explosion, this could be outdated by the time this is posted, and certainly by the time you see it. So please feel free to let us know in the comment section if there are any products, free tools, workflows, or generally related ideas that we might have missed. We will spotlight your comment when we do our update video.
Okay, awesome. So everyone should probably be aware that NVIDIA's AI solution in the works is called NVIDIA Picasso. It's not available yet, but if you are interested in experimenting with that when it comes out, which you probably should be, we recommend going over to their website and signing up to be notified of availability.
So first in line, and possibly a slightly premature reveal, is Luma Labs AI. This company previously put out tools for utilizing neural radiance field technology to produce insane 3D scan-like capture results. I've even reprocessed some of my really old scans with Luma Capture to really amazing effect. I've even reprocessed some of my old scans with Luma AI. And I gotta say, filling in the gaps the way this does, especially for this scene render that they put together here for you, it's really amazing being able to step back into something from 2019, for example. This was probably one of my first experiments ever trying to do a 3D scan, and it was taken with a really low resolution sort of, I think it was like a Android iPad knockoff kind of thing, and just I don't know, just being able to look that far back and see this much is really amazing to me. Also, something else interesting to note, the software understands how to isolate subject material. There's no reason why the table shouldn't be here with this, but it wasn't the subject, and so it has been left out, and that's impressive, that's smart. It's even sort of tried to fill in a bottom here, I can only imagine by guessing what should have been down there as it removed the background. But as you can see here, the background is still in the pictures. I didn't feed it like versions of the pictures that had the background clipped out, which was something that we had to do for certain kinds of scans. I literally just fed it the raw pictures, and it understands, you know, foreground and background subject. And I have the option to download this object right here, and I mean, this is a lot lower resolution than something I would probably actually use for anything now, but as a keepsake, it's pretty nice to have, honestly. Something that we did notice with this is that while this view tends to look pretty good, previous captures that were able to be processed by other programs like AGI Soft with output that was incredibly sharp, like alarmingly photorealistically sharp, and this in particular looks good, but pulling up the actual object, we get a much lower resolution texture with a lot more noise. It appears to do a projection down onto the object for the material texture to understand what sort of reflective properties it should have, and this is a Bakelite AK-47 grip, so they're, you know, a pretty glossy plastic kind of material. I originally, when I said that some subjects had to have the backgrounds removed from them artificially to be properly processed, this is a good case study for that, because that's what was done here. And this example was literally just grabbed off the internet somewhere. I grabbed this off of a YouTube video where somebody briefly shows views around toys that they're selling in some sort of auction, and from a very short YouTube video I was able to make a low resolution but very accurate model with a lot of details that you barely see. And while these results aren't game ready, they're more than enough to work with for visual effects options. But honestly, that's part of the point of this, is that we're going to have to get our hands a little bit dirty with the tools to rework models like this into being usable for games and products, basically. Now, I'm quite certain, through rather intelligent utilization of this massive database of Nerf fields that they've collected, that they are using this data to train the alpha of their Luma Imagine 3D AI. Currently, this is just in version 1.2, and previously I said that this was perhaps a slightly premature reveal, and that's because from what I'm seeing on their Discord server, it looks like they're only giving the trial out in a limited capacity, if you ask, on their Discord server, because they're about to drop a much better version that will blow this out of the water. And I mean, understandably, I assume the mindset there is that they don't want the software associated with premature results of the early alpha when the later results are going to be so much better. They definitely indicated that it really outdoes what we're currently looking at. So I just sort of want to put that out there as I show this. Not trying to do the company a disservice, I am very interested in this. So while these might be premature results, all the results that you're seeing right now on the screen presently are my test runs, after being given access to this alpha. I'm impressed. Texture resolution is a little poor. Full figures and detailed clothing results in sort of blobby structure, odd variation in elevation to represent different materials on the surface. But this followed the prompt. It made a guy with a tactical vest. And clearly it got a little confused here, but it's actually quite close. I mean, I don't know that this is usable in its current state, but that's the right materials in the right places. They're just sort of not in the right order. Was rather impressed by its ability to generate spooky organic alien materials, although I suppose AI has always been rather good at that. And as you'll see in every example of these AI projects, I did a lot of tactical stuff, as it's very relevant to my work. Unique designs for science fiction or alternative military gear are something I'm seeking after greatly, and this is a conceptual powerhouse. This model isn't perfect, but it's kind of shockingly complete, isn't it? I mean, it's not how I would have laid this design out, but this is a comprehensive helmet design. Now, you know, there's a lot of excess geometry here that is completely useless, and there's things sticking out of it that you definitely wouldn't want. But if you really wanted to, and that's sort of what we're going to be doing, if you wanted to take this into a 3D program and make this design into a workable model, you could do that. I ran a couple of concepts for monsters in these different AIs, and one particular monster I'm working on are sort of puppet people that are carved wooden figures that are decoys of human beings out in the Wild West game. And so I've been generating wooden figures and wooden heads a lot to see if I can get good results with that. I feel like this is usable. This is honestly usable as it is. You might see this head on a character that that ends up in the Western, because this is completely workable results. And this too, this is the second example of the same prompt that I ran essentially. This is wholly workable, you know, and Essentially, what you're going to figure out here is that you need a workflow that would work with 3D scans. Essentially, if you can work with 3D scan data, you are going to have a field day with AI-generated 3D models. I can't imagine that this is going to stay as confused and not making such useful, clear things very long. There's a lot of investment being put into this, but at any stage, having a workflow that enables you to work with 3D scans is a good thing to have in your arsenal.
Next up is Vertical, which is also free presently. If you are a Sketchfab user, you may have seen the Vertical account posting flurries of these tests. Whenever a user queries Vertical, be aware that the generated result will be posted with CC0 attribution properties on Sketchfab for anyone to download and use. That being said, the results for certain things are very impressive. I can't say with confidence what methodology of generation they're using, but if I had to guess, I would say that images are being generated first and then a 3D shape inferred from them. Sometimes the results are very messy and incoherent, but at times we are shocked by quality output. Obviously, again, not much of this would be immediately usable for much. I suppose you could probably get away with using some of this stuff for VFX, especially in the background as is. But the models tend to need rework. Here are a number of vertical test objects our studio has collected for experiments creating content for our different theme projects, where we will try to make each of these into usable mesh. A few major issues beyond garbled, unusable model generations are the textures having a lot of dark or blurry sections, incoherent holes in the surface of the mesh, absence of hard surface model detail, and that models that should be symmetrical tend not to be. We are still trying to figure out the upscale and repaint functions, as sometimes the mesh is left dark without detail after. Sometimes the textures generated from the mesh are really good. Even attempts at logos and text are seen almost complete and coherent. As concept objects, these are pretty passable in my opinion, especially the robot heads.
Before I get started explaining my workflow, I want to go through a couple of the best models that we ended up pulling out of this. I had a group of my friends all try this tool together, and we all tried sort of similar prompts, but these are essentially the most complete, most reworkable models that we ended up getting out of this system with Vertical. This was honestly one of the models that impressed me more than anything else. This is really good detail. This is, I don't know what it's trying to do here with the mouth guard, but it's almost like if this was just the raised elements and I put a flat surface behind this, it would make sense, as that would be the, and a coherent jaw guard. And the biggest issue that I'm seeing is that details on the left don't translate over to the right. And, you know, some of them actually do. And the helmet is fairly symmetrical this time, but especially in texture detail, not so much. And immediately, when I see this, all I think is this is essentially a rough 3D scan that just needs a rework that's being produced entirely by the computer instead of there ever actually being an object. And you essentially had to learn a complicated workflow for getting workable geometry out of 3D scans. And I was doing this stuff back in 2016, I think, where you would, more likely 2019, where you would take a handful of pictures of an object as you basically walked past it, and you would have to go home and get a really rough scan of that object and make it into a usable mesh. I have a pretty good example of it in my Sketchfab store. These are all themed after the current projects that we're working on too, so these assets are actually things that we really need for enemies and bosses and just essentially set dressing in several games that I'm working on. To further explain what I mean, what we're going to be doing, I'm going to go back through a couple of my much older videos of 3D scans. Now essentially you would have a real physical object and you would have a camera, and you would spend a tremendous amount of time and energy properly setting the lighting so that you could photograph the object from every single angle. Maybe you would set up a turntable and diffuse the background so that it wouldn't show up. Maybe you would move yourself around the object. Maybe you would place the object outside so that you've got good natural lighting. Maybe you would create an entirely isolated room with lighting set. Although a lot of the time we scanned things exactly where they were. Maybe as little as pulling it out into the middle of the room. Obviously, we 3D scanned buildings and stuff. And as you can see, we have some workable mesh here for some really just casually scanned objects. Now, here's the part of the workflow I have to worry about a little bit, because I do all of my reprocessing in ZBrush, and I've been doing this for a while now. I really actually enjoy ZBrush a lot. Using it is very, very positively stimulating. And I like being able to go in, get really close, and sculpt away the details. That feels very comfortable to me. But I know a lot of users use Blender, and Blender appears to be adding some serious sculpting solutions right now. So I would absolutely not count that out. As well as if you go on YouTube right now and you look up 3D scan workflow Blender, you will find several people who have actual solutions for how to clean up your 3D scans in Blender. And if Blender is your tool of choice, then that's what you're going to use. But I'm going to be using ZBrush, so most of what I'm about to say pertains to that. But essentially, these meshes are perfect for this workflow because you can work with a very partial object. You can work with something that you only scanned a little bit of. You can work with something where the texture isn't complete. And essentially, it's a restoration workflow where you use as much of the data as you can. You might rotate or mirror pieces to sort of simulate what should have been where is missing, and you reproject that detail back down onto the scan that you got in any way possible, sort of like stamping. And this essentially results in photo quality for a manipulatable asset that you can have in any scene. And I've been using this for assets that appear in photographs that are just things that are not where they should be but have correct lighting. I've used this for VFX, where physics objects like water need to flow around something like this pillar. I've used this with the Headshot 2 tool workflow to use it for creating characters, but essentially here I only had a section of this pole, for example, and I used a stamping process in ZBrush to create a complete asset where I didn't have the whole thing. And I even did it in a way that gave me a low polygon game ready mesh. Now, I honestly haven't leaned hard on this workflow in a good while. I really haven't had a reason to. I've been leaning a lot more heavily into figuring out how to work with Unreal Engine, how to work with blueprints, how to build levels. And the character work that I've done lately hasn't been photorealistic. I sort of figured maybe step back. These are big goals. I mean, it was 2019 and I was trying to have a photoreal shooter like that Unrecord game. And nobody was ready for the idea, and the render tech wasn't even really there yet, but I was excited and I threw my back into scanning tons of stuff. I really wish I had more previews, and I probably will get more previews out here because this is very light work for what I did. Now, this airsoft mask is a really particularly interesting piece because it's completely finished in exactly the style that I'm trying to encourage you to work on. Essentially, the workflow I'm trying to teach is pulling this stuff into ZBrush and reconstructing the model. Now, originally with the 3D scans, I was actually going for a fair level of accuracy. The objects had to hold up in a scene with other photoreal objects. At least we're more orienting ourselves around creating unique visual objects, so I really don't think that hyperfixating on accuracy and realism is the right approach. This is a very conceptual workflow, and for conceptual sculptors, artists that do a lot of rough sculpting, I feel like this is going to be revolutionary. But essentially, if you wanted to have these assets in a kind of state where you could bring them into an Unreal Engine game, you would have to pull them in and totally retopologize them, which shouldn't be difficult if you've used ZBrush much. ZBrush is a very powerful tool, and there are other tools out there that can also do this job, but I definitely prefer the reprojection workflow for capturing those photo details. Sorry, this is very old work that I'm going through right here, back in 7 years ago. Yeah, that is some prototype stuff. Now here is that actual airsoft mask scan, and it's been set up on Sketchfab so that anyone can download and use this. This is the detail of the actual mesh. If you set it in final render though, you might notice it looks a lot better than that. I did erase out the name of the company, I forget what it was, and this helped because when I mirrored it, the text was backward. But what's interesting about this scan is I would say that the detail that I actually had of it was essentially what's lit right now. If I just go right to here, what's lit from here where I had the edge of this buckle, and I came around, and I had a cross section. I think it cut across the middle right here, and scooped across this side, and everything else here is mirrored and reprojected into place. And you can see it doesn't look like that. Texture is sort of faked back into place using part of the texture map that you're given when you scan. So you end up with like a little palette to paint with. And essentially this is how I was planning on creating an entire game of much more realistic assets. I was sort of punching above my weight. It would have been too much work. Okay, so essentially in our next video, I am going to take ZBrush and pull some of these models in and actually show you how to clean them up, reprocess them, make some functional pieces of 3D asset tree for your projects. I would recommend going through and looking at some of this ZBrush or Blender, depending on what you're using, retopology, cleanup kind of workflow videos. You might notice that there's a whole bunch of different approaches to this. Essentially, you just want to be able to get clean mesh, and you want to be able to hold on to a second copy of your model in the scene to reproject texture and color detail. I would also highly recommend looking up a ZBrush hard surface science fiction workflow, because they tend to have a lot of organic shapes that are hard surface modeled by extracting them or mask projecting them off of the surface of base meshes. And considering that we're essentially working with a soft base mesh for the shape of our robots' heads, that's perfect. You will find a lot of tutorials on how these models could be better used to shape individual parts, and I feel like we're at no loss for that. I think it's important to remember that a lot of ZBrush models at some point start out in this same very blobby form without any kind of texture to define the secondary or tertiary shapes. So being able to generate a mesh that actually has visual detail on it like that is a couple of steps up on what we used to be doing. I honestly think sticking with these tools in this workflow is going to result in artists really being able to maximize some creative output. These tools are freely available, anyone can use them, and I feel like neglecting to see what you could even do with them is kind of just a gamble on your part. I know there's a lot of drama presently about the state of AI and how it's going to affect individual artists and companies and how those entities interact with each other. But as an individual artist, I feel like completely leaving these tools up on the shelf is doing yourself a disservice. So maybe consider the benefits of incorporating some AI generation into your workflow. I definitely feel like ZBrush is basically made for this job, considering how easy it is to add hard surface detail and considering how easy it is to detail a sculpted mesh with ZBrush. So essentially in the next video, or hopefully the next video, I might have to release a couple updates before that because there's a whole lot of other stuff going on with our studio. But essentially, really soon here, what you're going to see is I'm going to put out a video where I practically go hands-on and show some examples, and I'm going to pull in a bunch of these objects that we showcased here to you all, and I'm going to show you the different processes and techniques that I'm going to use in approaching turning these kinds of objects into usable mesh for games. A lot of the mesh is going to be generated with verticals, so you're just going to be able to download from Sketchfab and follow along if you want. I'm going to use a lot of the same techniques as you're seeing here, although this is not my work. And I'm really hoping, as a studio consisting of very few people, that adopting these techniques allows us to put out larger productions, more meaningful work, and expand outward so that we can have other people working with us doing more. I'm really looking forward to how this is improving my creative output. I'm really looking forward to how motivating this is for me and my friends. This is a very exciting time right now to be an artist, and while there's a lot of concern and fear over the way that people are going to abuse AI, I really think that as individual artists, this isn't going to go away. This isn't something where it's like we can sit back and be like, get rid of AI. The cat's out of the bag on this one. So finding small ways to incorporate it as time-saving measures in professional artists' workflows, I feel like that's the most appropriate approach to handling art right now. Handling AI art right now. Not replacing anybody, just taking the artist and you're making them able to make so much more. You're just taking your own workflow and expanding it out to the point where you can actually compete in the marketplace of the future. Because, if you don't believe that there are people that are going to exploit this for cheap means, I don't know why you would. I'm definitely not here to be a doomsayer. I'm here to get you motivated. I'm here to get you positive. I really think that this is a great idea, and in the future I will post more videos about tools and techniques that can be used to expedite and expand your media creation. This is about you being as productive as possible. This is about you getting the reach that you deserve for the messages that you have. So for now, that's at least 2 tools that you can get your hands on that generate 3D mesh using AI from text prompts. It's really interesting. This is again something that just was not possible. I don't know if looking back on this video people are going to be like, what are they talking about? I've always been able to speak to my game engine and have it primordial soup dream up every scene that I wanted on command. But in this moment right now, 3D models are something that you make by hand, or that you 3D scan into existence. This is new. And essentially, my plan is to show all of you how I plan on utilizing it to maximize my efficiency, because why not share this with other artists? I love my community, I love you other artists, I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really proud to be a content creator right now. It's a really amazing time to be a digital artist. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I'm really looking forward to putting out another update or 2 on this. This is exciting. I'll see you all soon. Thank you so much again for tuning in. EveBat Studios out.